Talk about this is going to be one of the weirder weeks in Oriole baseball, right? I guess when you consider where one game road trips out and back, this is just a weird spot, and certainly for the Orioles on Monday night, a great chance to win that baseball game down in Dallas and be the first place team that, let's be honest, if you're going to make the playoffs this year, you're probably going to see the Texas Rangers, right?
Yeah, and you're right. They had great opportunities. I mean, you look at this game, they had 15 hits over the course of the night, and especially early on, they had chances to really give Kevin Gausman a big lead, and instead they scored the 3 runs in the second inning. I mean, that was a productive inning, but then they get to the third inning, bases loaded, nobody out. I mean, you have a chance to bust it wide open against Derek Holland and really give Gausman some breathing room, which, let's face it, I mean, I'm not saying he's pitched great, and certainly he's struggled here recently, but he hasn't pitched with leads very often at all. Had a chance to really give him some breathing room, and they couldn't do it. J.J. Hardy strikes out on a pitch in the dirt, and then Nolan Reimold grounds into a double play, and the game dramatically shifted from there. Gausman gives up a home run in the bottom of the third, and then the bottom of the fourth inning. So many times we talk about a pitcher having command issues. I don't even think it was so much command in the bottom of the fourth. I question some of the pitch selection. I question ranks fourth base, but no one in scoring position. Just a frustrating night because you have 15 hits. You better have scored more than 3 times. They'd be the first ones to tell you that. Opportunity. No shame in losing to the first-place Rangers on the road on a weird makeup game, but the problem is you come back home, you get in really, really late Tuesday morning, and now you have a quick turnaround, and it's the Padres. I mean, it's not a team that strikes fear into your hearts, but just kind of a weird week.
But you don't want to split these two, right? And when you look at the starting pitching right now, I mean, at this point on Wednesday night, they're TBD, and somehow that shadow looks a little bit like Ubaldo Jimenez somehow.
Maybe. There's a guy who is rested, yeah. But, I mean, I don't know.
I'm well rested right now, Luke. I got a good night's sleep Monday night.
Exactly. And, I mean, Adrisamar Despaigne is still in play. He pitched on Sunday, but he didn't throw a ton of pitches. Sunday would kind of be, if you're talking about a Wednesday starter, Sunday would be a day where, it could be a work day for you. So, but, I mean, Jimenez is an option. He's not a good option. He's not an option that, believe me, not even Buck Showalter is happy about him as an option. But it's kind of where they are right now with their bullpen being stretched out. They're a man short with Machado being down for a couple more games, and just the lack of options in general. We've talked about this. It's one reason why Mike Wright and Jimenez were still being trotted out there every 5th day until recently is you don't have options in the minor leagues that you feel good about.
Well, we saw this in March. I mean, I don't know that Wright and Wilson were really the options they were looking for. The options they were looking for was a healthy $11 million Gallardo, a healthy $12 million Jimenez, right? I mean, those were the guys that were supposed to take the ball 28, 32 times this year, right?
Right. And they're hoping that Gallardo can at least be that. They're still hoping, even if it's just an unlikely lottery ticket at this point, they're still hoping that Jimenez might be able to get straightened out. Now, that doesn't mean he should start Wednesday. That doesn't mean he is going to get it straightened out, but it does speak to their lack of options right now. Mike Wright's starting at Norfolk on Wednesday. T.J. McFarland started on Monday night in Norfolk. I mean, he's a guy that they haven't tried starting other than I think he had one spot start 2 years ago and actually pitched decently in that opportunity, but they're just, they're reaching right now. There's no doubt about that. I've said this so many times about what they need overall from their starting rotation. It's not a really high bar, but boy, right now trying to find another guy to potentially give you that. And look, I'm not saying that this isn't me arguing that Jimenez should take the ball on Wednesday or that Mike Wright should be back in the rotation. You need to give some other guys some opportunities, if nothing else, just to say we tried some other individuals, but you look at Norfolk, the Nick Addingtons of the world, just they're not exciting. It's not something that gives you optimism that this guy could be better. Maybe a little bit better, but I'm not sure good enough is the real enough. So,
well, good enough is what? To the fifth inning, right? I mean, if they get you to the fifth inning and give up 3 or 4 runs, at this point, that's good enough to, what do we say? But, John Harbaugh would say that's below the bar, but that's still kind of, if they could get that on Wednesday night, they'd be happy against the last place team.
If they could get, in general, whoever it is, as their fifth starter now, and I'm working under the assumption that Gallardo can settle in and be their Wilson can continue to give them what he's given them. What hasn't been great, but it's at least given them a chance to win. And, he has an ERA of right around 4.1 or so after his latest start at Fenway, which you're hoping he can build on that. Not expecting him to do that every time out, but can they find a fifth starter, another guy who can give them even a 4.5 ERA? Again, that's not good. I'm not saying that's good. I'm not saying that's something to be celebrated. But I think with their offense, having that kind of a fifth starter would be good enough. It would be something you could live with at least, not guys that have ERAs of 6 or 7 when you're talking about Wright or Jimenez. So it's just, it's very frustrating. I think it's clear they need to try to find another starter. I'm realistic in saying they're not going to find a number 1. They're not going to find a number 2. They don't have, 1, I don't know if those types of guys are even going to be out there. 2, they don't have a guy like that. But can you find a guy that you feel can at least stabilize the back end of your rotation, a guy that you feel we can live with this guy? I mean, as much as we've all beaten up the Jake Arrieta for Scott Feldman trade, and clearly we know what's happened in the aftermath, they would take a Scott Feldman kind of guy even to put at the back end of their rotation right now. But, the problem is lots of teams are looking for pitching even of that ilk, and to try to find that, even a guy like that, isn't going to be easy. Not saying impossible, but is it going to be easy?
I was going to wear my Tony Gwynn jersey today, but I figured that would send the wrong message, especially with the Padres being in last place. But they don't come to Baltimore very often, and this little 2-game, and then we're going to go out there and give them a kiss on the cheek next week as well. And, the Padres are an interesting team, right? I mean, they have tried and tried and tried. Kind of remind me of the Orioles for 15 years, right? Where, like, every year you look up and you're like, well, they don't have the best talent. And a year and a half ago, they sort of broke that model, looking to get, the All-Star game's going to be there in a couple of weeks. I think they thought they would be a relevant team by now. And, huge investments in a lot of players in the offseason. And as much as we talk about our own versions of Ubaldo Jimenez or Gallardo, the Padres have been, just decimated by bad free agent signings, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it's a great lesson for anyone, no matter whether you're talking about one of the highest payrolls in the league or teams that are kind of in the middle of the pack and they decide they're going to, quote, go for it, that free agency, it's a slippery slope. Now, maybe it's not as reckless or dangerous as it can be in the NFL when we've seen so many times that teams that rely on free agency to build a get their feelings hurt. And maybe the Denver Broncos here recently have been the exception, but overall history shows it doesn't work. But San Diego is a great example of you can't have big holes in your roster and then automatically fill them with free agents and just say it was a perfect example. I mean, some of the players that they've acquired over the last couple of years, I mean, Matt Kemp was a big acquisition for them, and you see how that's worked out. He's been a major disappointment.
Although he might be their most tradable commodity if they're willing to pay him. He's a major league player, right? I mean, he is.
I guess. He is, but with him and you look at the salary and you say, you can do better than that. I mean, he really hasn't been.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but
on base percentage right now. He's got 15 home runs, I get it, but nothing other than the home runs and the RBIs, which is way more. But, he has a 743 OPS. I mean, and you've seen how Shields has worked out. I mean, they've gotten rid of him, but he hadn't really worked out the way that they were expecting, and now we've seen him be a disaster. This is just a team that isn't very good right now, and they beat the Nationals for the final 2 games of their series over the weekend. So it's not as though they're the worst team in the history of baseball, but they're a team that the Orioles clearly should have some visions on trying to take both of these games, and then going out to San Diego for two next week and handling their business there. But this is a team that clearly is, as you mentioned, searching for it. They thought that they might be in a position where they were ready to take a step forward. I think, to me, their best player. They have Will Myers, who's been a really, really good. He's not a bad player, but Kemp hasn't been what they need him to be. They have Melvin Upton Jr., B.J. Upton, who it seems like a long time ago when he was a good player in Tampa Bay. But this is just a team that isn't particularly good, and the Orioles really no excuse for not handling their business. But as I said, coming home from Arlington, getting in around 4 a.m. Tuesday morning, and not getting into their own beds until 5 or 6. Be interesting to see how the Orioles go into the Hill.
Luke Jones can be reached, Luke at WNST.net. He's also Baltimore Luke at on Twitter, covering all things Orioles. It's funny you would say about free agency and the Padres and how we see football teams go the wrong way. I think it's different when you're given a wide receiver $15 million and say you got to go catch it, and that's more of an individual thing. Almost everything else in football really depends on offense, scheme, guys around you, as we learn with Ray Lewis and the various linebackers who left to become wealthy when they left Ray Lewis. But, I know it should be this way. If you buy a pitcher, you should get a pitcher. If you buy a second baseman, you should get a guy that can turn a double play, hit, make a throw to the plate from, center field. But, it's an individual game, right? So in baseball, you look at these players and you're like, well, we need a shortstop, and he's a shortstop, so we'll plug him in, and he'll hit 291, and we'll give him $150 million. But baseball doesn't work that way either, and it really is fascinating that the Padres could collect all of these players that everyone in baseball felt pretty good about them getting 18 months ago, and the thing turning into if Chris Davis winds up hitting the end of his rope early next year, and the Orioles are just stuck with a guy who was pretty one-dimensional when they signed him, and we talked about it. But and I guess there's a reason a lot of these guys wind up getting to free agency to begin with, because if you like them enough, like the Orioles liked Adam Jones, hopefully like they like Manny Machado, they don't even get to free agency.
Yeah, well, and that's something that we're really starting to see a lot more of, especially with it's. So with young positional talent, but we've seen it certainly with young pitchers as well, that teams are extending these guys and preventing them from even getting the free agency. Or maybe they're hitting free agency at 30 as opposed to 27. So you're missing out on some of those prime years. Is him being the best, maybe into a decent, get in the wins above wins at rosters. So, that's, conducive to pitching really well. You look at this year that you kind of compare, at least in the National League, is Arizona kind of going the same approach, and you've seen that.
Yeah, they went and bought the best pitcher they could get, right?
Yeah, but you see that they're not exactly sitting in the NL West in first place or anything like that. So it's not easy to do. That's why we talk so much, and as much as no one pays attention to a blue chip, are going to be in the minors for a couple. They've had guys who
they went out and gave
year, right?